Words.
Got to do that. So, hi, Rebecca. Hey
Hi.
to Stockholm. Good to have you here. I hope you can hear us all right.
Yep.
Really looking forward to your session, and also welcome to the ones joining online. Yeah, communities of practice. Everyone's talking about it, I think. Microsoft's even thinking about it,
Excellent.
and yeah, really excited what you brought in right from your KM background. A little bit of Microsoft flavor, but not too much, if I know you correctly. So let's see. And yeah.
Well, let's say there is a fair amount of Microsoft flavor to it, and that kind of goes with the territory, given that I've dedicated the last 18 or 19 years now of my life to Microsoft and Microsoft technology. And you talk about what you know, right? Whether you love it
Yeah.
or hate it.
Which is totally fair, yeah. So
And sometimes it's a
yeah.
love-hate relationship, let me assure you of that.
I heard some rumors about that from your side, yeah. So very good.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe I remember it wrong. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
What happens wherever stays wherever, right? We have a couple more people in the call, so it's not you and me only. So I just leave the floor to you, and let's kick it off. How should we handle it with questions, Rebecca? Should we wait to the end or just shout out? Or
No, we can go throughout. Unfortunately, I'm not able to open my, let's see, here we go. I'm not able to open the presentation, which is slightly annoying. But if you give me 1 second.
It's a Microsoft problem, I heard. Yeah, okay.
It is a Microsoft problem right now. It is. So let me just do a quick thing.
Take your time.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's
I think I understood we can ask questions along the way, right?
We can, absolutely. Yeah. You
Fantastic.
can. So
we have a first question before we even started, Rebecca.
There we go. Is that why I'm a masochist dedicating my life to Microsoft?
Who knows?
No, everything fine. Hi, Rebecca. My name is
Hi.
Simon. As a MVP, I know you have some insights before the Microsoft Inspire will taking place in some weeks. Maybe you can share us some insights or some news you already know that we can expect for the Viva Suite and all these things. Are there any news you are able to share with us before the Microsoft Inspire will take place?
Well, not really, because as you probably know, there is a lot of hush-hush around these things, and for good reason, because Ignite is really one of the biggest launch events of the Microsoft fiscal year and the calendar year. So I know of some things that are coming, but I can't really talk about them. Some things that have already been mentioned, and I am sorry, but I'm not.
That's fine. I just give it a try.
Give me 1 second just so I can get our slides up, right? Because I don't like to start off late, and I do apologize for these issues, but here we go.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, the problem is I'm on 2 different tenants, right? So I got the invitation on a different tenant than the one I'm actually joining the call, but here we go. There we go. Finally, thank you for your patience. As you can tell, I'm not an MVP in Teams, that's for sure. I struggle with it as much as anyone else. So just to start off, a little bit about myself. I have, as someone already pointed out, I am a Microsoft MVP. That stands for Most Valuable Professional. It's an award given to people that are contributing a lot, sharing a lot of knowledge with the broader Microsoft and, in my case, M365 community. So talking at events like these, for instance, but also being very active on LinkedIn, sharing our knowledge, writing articles and so forth. We do a lot of things for the community, and it's nice that that's been recognized. So my technical designation in terms of my MVP status is for SharePoint. And I want to emphasize for this audience who are very familiar with knowledge management, both the curious, the novices, and the more seasoned professionals, I'm sure. My focus on SharePoint is solely on the enterprise content management side, not on intranet. That takes a whole different skill sets, and I am not creative. I'm fairly good at communications, but not to the extent that I am investing in building my skills around building intranet. So I'm looking at the KM specific side, the governance, the taxonomy, the metadata, all those things that we love. I've been working for Microsoft for about 15 years, 11 of those years at corporate headquarters in Redmond. I've had various roles and I've done a lot of things, but the few or the common denominators in my almost 25-year career now is that I've always been working in adoption and change management. And I've always had one foot in technology and one foot in the business, and very often been the liaison, helping the two talk to one another. In 2013, I started working in knowledge management full time. And since then, I've grown my reputation and my skill and my experience in the area quite a lot. I actually started doing knowledge management earlier than that, before I even knew that there was something called knowledge management. I was asked to start up the first community of practice in Microsoft Consulting Services that was not aligned with a specific technology, but it was actually focused on more of the people skills and the soft skills around delivery management. So for project managers and engagement managers. And that helped me build my network and gain visibility with corporate headquarters. So I was asked to take my first role at the consulting division at HQ, and moved and relocated to Seattle and worked in Redmond from the beginning of 2011. So communities of practice is very near and dear to my heart. Sometimes I call it communities of passion, because it's really what it's all about. It's bringing together people that are passionate about a certain topic or a certain application area or a technology, and helping them connect with others that are like-minded and share their knowledge. And as you can tell from my recap of my 25 years in IT and telecoms, communities are very near and dear to me, because I've seen first-handedly what a great conduit it is for learning, not just for learning and sharing, but also to grow as a professional, grow as a person. And, the impact it has had on my career has been tremendous. So I will always carry communities of practice very close to my heart and be very thankful. What are communities? Well, to many of you in the room here, it might be, obvious, but I want to make sure that we're inclusive of everyone who's attending, whether you're at the beginning of your KM journey or whether you have a lot of experience in this area. But basically, this is one of the most common definitions of it that dates back to 1991 and the work of Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger. It's a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something that they're practicing in their daily life, or something that they like to learn more about. It's sometimes referred to as peer learning, sometimes it's referred to as social learning or just knowledge sharing, right? But it is at the core of it, it's what it speaks to a human basic need, the need to be a part of something bigger, right? And we all belong to different communities, even if it's not work related. How many of you aren't member of a specific Facebook groups for dog lovers or beekeepers or, wine connoisseurs? We have those, and we've always had those communities from the very youngest age. We form groups with people that we get along with, or people we have something in common with, whether that's in kindergarten or through sports activities in school or being a part of the Scout Corps or things like that. So that's a very human and very basic need for us as humans. I sometimes include this slide because there is a lot of confusion sometimes in organizations that I interact with, not only related to technology and in the Microsoft space. That's when should I use Teams versus when should I use Engage, which is the community and collaboration platform in M365. And I haven't forgotten about the question about Ignite, and I will give you some hints, I promise. So hold that thought and do remind me if I seem like I'm trying to duck for that question, because I'm not. But teams are kind of like projects. They have a more clear definition, right? They have a clear purpose. They have a specific task. They're typically defined by the task they're assigned or by the organizational structure, where communities of practice are organic networks that tend to be more informal and loose. Sometimes they're not even defined on a platform. It's just a group of people that come together and because they have common interests. And I think that's what is the biggest differentiator. And some of the things that I've learned throughout my career, and having started as a community lead before I even knew that knowledge management was a thing, I've seen the value that it can bring to an organization, even if it's not aligned with the organization, and even if it's not a group that is formed to solve a specific problem. A lot of solutions and a lot of improvements can be generated in those communities. And I believe 100% that it's because people have the free will to join communities. So I'm going to be talking a bit more in detail on the learnings I've done, because I know in some organizations, management wants to define communities top down, for instance, rather than let them grow organically. I don't subscribe to that school of thought, and I will be explaining to you why. But even though they tend to grow organically and they form sometimes and very often in an informal setting before they're formalized, it is important, and one thing to keep in mind, that they usually have a purpose. People don't form groups because they just want to talk about stuff. They form groups because they feel that there is a need to form a group, either because something is not working very well, or because they want to learn more about a specific topic or a specific knowledge area. The other thing, and that's maybe a page that I'm taking out of my book in having had a career in adoption and change management, it's to always think about the 3 W's. What's in it for me, what's in it for my team or my organization, and what's in it for my customer. And what's in it for me as a community member, that one is pretty easy to explain. But why I want to include this and why I want to talk about this is because I've had the very bad experience several times in my career where managers haven't understood why I devoted so much of my time. A lot of it when I worked in Microsoft Consulting, and I started as a community lead. This was in 08 or 09, I think. I had a full-time job, so I did a lot of the community work on evenings and weekends because I felt like I found my tribe and this was a worthy cause and something that I just got a lot of personal satisfaction out of leading this community because of maybe the way I am as a person. I actually thrive when I feel I have an impact, that I can help people, that I can contribute to making things easier for others. That's my number one motivational factor, and it's always been. And I think the beauty of communities when they work really well is when you have a group of people that actually see that it's the gift of giving without expecting anything in return. That is what drives us. And that's where you typically want to look for people to be leaders in the community or experts in your community, the people that can help really drive engagement and drive the conversation. So it's always important to think in terms of what's in it for me, meaning what's in it for the member. If they don't feel they're getting value out of it, then they're not going to engage, they're not going to contribute. This was one of the biggest learnings that we had to explain time and time again after I moved out of my field role in Microsoft Sweden as a community lead, doing this as a hobby, and I moved to corporate and started working for the team that ran the entire knowledge management strategy and all the programs across content, collaboration, and communities. We often had senior executives that came to us and said, we hear this community thing is really popular and it seems very productive and people learn a lot of good stuff and solve problems. So we think there has to be a community for salespeople in consulting sales. We tried a few times to satisfy the requirements and the demands from senior leadership, but every time it failed because you took a bunch of people and based on their standard title or their job role, you put them into a community and told them, you are going to be active in this community, you are going to contribute. Well, that never works, does it? Just look at our own behaviors, how we interact on social media or on LinkedIn. We follow the people we think have something interesting to say. We have most of our interactions with people who are interested in the same things. And the same thing goes for communities, right? But if you want to break it down in more terms of business value, what's in it for the community member? Well, it's faster problem solving and learning. In a professional services organization, this is almost a necessity, having communities, because a lot of consultants or project managers are going to be spending a lot of their time on a customer's site, working in the customer's environment, and they might not have access to their home organization's knowledge base and so forth. So having that community where you can reach out, ask a question, ask to get some content or some examples is really invaluable. And it helps them help their customers much quicker and with much better outcomes. It's also a place for professional growth and recognition, right? And I think my personal story about how I got into communities and how that forwarded my career speaks volumes to the sense of that. The sense of belonging and well-being, like I said, this is a human basic need. We need to feel that we are part of something bigger than ourselves or our specific job, task, etc. It also gives really quick access to best practices and resources because anyone can go to a document repository and look for an instruction manual. But if you actually talk to someone who has been using that or who has been using the same piece of machinery or piece of equipment or whatever it is that you're trying to get on top of, it's a lot easier. And there's tons of research that shows that knowledge sharing through conversation is so many more times efficient than writing something down, handing it off to the next person for them to read it and learn from it, right? And then it's also a great place for innovation, right? Very often our consultants would ask on a community if somebody else had faced the same problem or created a similar solution that they had been assigned to create for one of their customers. And having that interaction, learning from one another, but also to not start from scratch every time, reinvent the wheel every time you're solving a problem, makes us solve the problems better and faster, but we can also build on the knowledge and experience of others and create a much better solution. Plus, we don't have to start from scratch. But having fun is a really big part of it, and making friends for life. I have people in my network that I met through some of these communities now, 15 years ago, that I'm still in touch with. Some of them I've barely spent an hour in the same room or even in the same city or country, but I still consider them some of my closest friends, and I'm still in touch with them. So that is something that's very powerful with communities as well. Having fun at work is not a bad thing. People who have fun are happier at work, and who feel they are amongst friends are happier. And when we're happier in our work environment, we're going to be more productive, we're going to be more innovative, and we're going to do much better work because we feel committed to it and we feel motivated. But there's also benefits for the organization. And some of those are just the flip side of the coin of the individual benefits. But communities can be extremely effective when we are facing a change, when we need to drive adoption and change management, whether that's a process change or whether that's a reorganization, restructuring of the organization, etc. Using communities to reach people on their terms and in their backyard, as opposed to just pushing out information from management saying that thou shalt now do this, right? So they can be very effective conduits for change. It's also a great source of, first of all, retaining talent. And that comes back to what I was saying about having fun and feeling included. People tend to stay longer in organization where the level of engagement is high. And I've had this question, and I've had this several times in my career, where I've been asked, why should I, as a manager, support you in spending the time that you spend working with these communities? What am I getting out of it? And what those people were actually asking me was, aren't you just wasting time? Aren't you wasting time that you should be spending solving problems for our customers and billing hours and basically contributing to my P&L? Well, that's a very short-sighted way of looking at it, right? If you have a lot of communities that are just about cat lovers at work or wine connoisseurs at work, there's a place for those social communities as well, and they help foster the culture and build that sense of belonging. But they shouldn't take over, right? Because then it can become a time thief. But the fact that we can ensure that people are more engaged and happier and healthier means they're going to stay longer in the organization. It's also a great way to attract talent, but it's also a great source of identifying people that could be moving internally and maybe shifting focus of their career, because you will see people joining communities that are related to their current role, but you will also see a lot of people join communities to talk about topics associated with a different job. And that also can be leveraged, and you can use that if you feel the need to reshape your organization and shift talent from one part of the organization or from one business division to another. So it's a great way to identify internal talent. For the client, the customer, and I've created this slide, you know, keeping professional services and consulting in mind, but it applies to a lot of other industry verticals and a lot of other organizations as well, because in most supplier client relationship, we are trying to work together to solve a problem. And if we can solve that problem quicker because we have access to all of the expertise and all of the skills in the organization, we are going to come up with better solutions. We're going to come up with better solutions faster. And at the end of the day, the customer satisfaction is going to grow, which builds back to that long-term view on having good relationships with our customers and making sure that they are happy with what we are providing them with. Any questions or comments on that so far? No? Okay, I'll move on. At least that gave me a chance to catch my breath. All right, I'm watching Lucas and the people at the back there to make sure that there wasn't a question, but.
No, Rebecca, there are no questions here in the room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. And for you online, please unmute or put your hand up, raise your hand to make me aware if you want to add something or ask something. So even though I speak very passionately, I hope that comes through about the importance of letting communities flourish and grow organically, there is a sense to, or there is a point in having some governance and having some management around it. This is Dan. He is the guy who asked me to come back to Microsoft after I resigned the first time in 2018. And he is now no longer in the team where he hired me back into Microsoft, but he is the product leader for Engage. And Engage is Microsoft 365's platform and solution for communities and internal communications. It has two hero scenarios, but communities is the part that I'm really passionate about. Some of you might know me from LinkedIn and so forth and from other communities, KM communities, and you might know that I've had a podcast. And there are a couple of episodes. The very first episode that we put out in May of last year, and the very last episode that we published a few weeks ago, both tie into Engage and how Engage supports communities of practice. The final episode actually had James, who is working on Dan's team, and Stan Garfield. And Stan has recently published another book on communities, and he's talking about platforms as well. And he's quite clear in that book and also in our podcast episode that he sees Engage as the best platform to support and nurture communities of practice. And we're going to get a little bit more into that. But I also heard the subtle hint that from Lucas that this shouldn't be too Microsoftified or too Microsoft focused. So I'll try to hold back a little bit on that. But Dan is very passionate and he's a very engaging speaker, but he also genuinely believes in the importance of engagement, engaging your employees, right? And that's what communities is all about at the end of the day. But in order to make sure that that engagement is sustainable and that we are adding value to the people who are dedicating time to our communities, it is recommended that we have some roles and responsibilities. For those of you who want to learn more about this, there's a white paper that myself and Susan Hanley published in May of this year. And I can make sure I'll share the link. I'm sure Lucas is going to pull together some links and resources, so I'll make sure that that finds its way back to you. But in general, we talk about 3 types of roles that you need to govern and manage a community. You need a lead. And I've put number 1 in brackets here, number 9 and number 90, because that's typically the scale in numbers that we see. If we have 1 lead, we'll have 9 experts in the community for every 90 members that we have. Of course, you can have 2 leads, sharing the responsibility as well. But I wanted to call out a few things in terms of what are their main accountabilities and responsibilities. Because if you expect to create communities and put the entire load of managing and keeping everyone engaged on one person, then that person is not potentially staying that long, especially if this is something they're doing as a stretch goal or as an extracurricular activity, right? So it's important to differentiate between the roles and responsibilities, right? And the A here stands for accountability. The lead really should set the strategy and the vision for the community and have some objectives in mind, but also be responsible for setting the tone, fostering engagement. Having a community charter is a good idea. In the, 10 or so years that I was involved, 8 years maybe, in communities at different capacities in Microsoft Consulting, it happened once that I had to have a sidebar with a community member because their tone of voice was not acceptable. If we cannot foster a culture where people feel safe, a culture of trust where people dare to ask questions without risking getting their head ripped off by another community member. And I'm sure you can relate because you've all seen the trolls on various Facebook groups, right? Where somebody is sharing something out of the, with the best intent, and somebody jumps at them and start telling them that they're stupid for sharing that, or they should really not be wasting people's time and so forth. That happened once in the 8 or 10 years that I worked on this, right? I had a side conversation with that person in a very constructive manner, explained to them that maybe phrasing your response differently would have been better, etc. But we had 105 communities, and we had over 1,000 leads and SMEs engaged in those communities, and we had some 43,000 to 44,000 unique users or members of those communities in a given month. So for me to come across that once really is negligible, right? But it's all about the leader and how you set the tone and the expectations. It's also good to have some subject matter experts or SMEs, because they can provide that authoritative guidance. And this is another reason why I really like Engage as a community platform, because you can appoint and designate that badge of honor to your experts in the community. But that badge also comes with a responsibility, because you should set the expectation that they're not just called out for their expertise, but they're actually expected to help. And whether that help is by seeding conversations in a community to drive up engagement, or presenting some learnings or success stories, or just moderating the community conversation. There are several, of course, ways to look at that role. What I like about Engage is that if someone is asking a question on a community chat, and a subject matter expert in that community responds to that question, it will automatically be tagged and marked as a verified answer, meaning it's the authoritative answer to that question. And that really helps, because that is then pinned at the top of that long conversation thread, because sometimes you have a lot of people giving answers and they're not necessarily wrong. They can just be coming from a different context and a different perspective. So there's value in all of it, but it's also important for members to easily find out what is the one source of truth and the right answer if they really need to know that this is the right answer. Members are, of course, encouraged to participate and to share the knowledge and to apply the knowledge that they learn. But don't be surprised if you have communities where there, 10% or 20% of the members are active and the other 80 to 90% are just what we sometimes call lurkers. That does not mean that it's a waste of their time and that it's a waste of, community space, because some people aren't as vocal. So be inclusive and let those people be, and let them listen and let them participate in the way that they feel that they can. Now, if you only have 1% active members and 99 that are idle, then that can, of course, be a signal that maybe you're not meeting the expectations of the members. But in general, having a bulk of people that rarely interacts or never interacts is not necessarily a bad thing. This is a cultural anthropologist that I've had the pleasure of working with, writing a white paper a couple of years ago, commissioned by Microsoft and Logitech. And it was towards the end of the pandemic and when hybrid work started really taking off, when people were going back to the office, but everyone did not return, etc. And she said something that I thought was very valuable and that I've carried with me since, that everything starts with culture. And that, I think, goes very well for communities, but it also goes for any adoption or change management, whether you're embarking on an AI transformation or whether it's an organizational change. Culture is super important, and it can be a supporting corset, but it can also become a straitjacket. So focusing on what is the culture in our organization and how do communities fit into that culture, but also what is the culture in our community? How do people behave? How do people respond and interact? What are the common norms and values that we want to follow and that we want to encourage? I have, and I see some supporting comments here for that. So thank you. Just so you know, I've turned off the chat because I find it very distracting when I'm delivering these sessions online if all the messages keep coming up. So I do ask you to interrupt, and if you can, raise your hand or unmute yourself, and feel free to interrupt me at any time. I want this to be interactive, right?
Becca? I'm gonna disrupt straight away. No, it's a little bit of a 5 minutes hint, right? 5 to 7 minutes hint. But really, yeah, maybe I just want to open up the space. Germans are a bit more holding back to asking questions. Being one myself, I can say that. Is there anything? Yeah, here.
Well, I've never seen you hold back, but
that's a different topic we shouldn't address right now, I think. Yeah, but all good.
Rebecca, thank you so far. Simon again. I see a lot of companies, they avoid implementing Viva Engage because they have so many tools used right now in the company, and they try to build up a community in Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
You stated so far a lot of information about company roles, community roles, responsibilities, about members, and so on. What would you recommend, or what is your recommendation when a company would like to go this strategy or would hold on this strategy to say we're not using Viva Engage, we stay on the Microsoft Teams side and use Microsoft Teams as a platform for communication, collaboration, and so on? I know it's not the right tool, but if the C-level doesn't want this.
The short answer is don't do it. because that's not the intent and purpose, and it's not what it's designed for. That can sound like a very developer-centric response, but it's not. It does not have the capabilities for moderation. It does not have all the features that a community needs. Like, for instance, you can't tell who is the lead, who is the subject matter expert, what are they an expert in, right? But so it kind of comes back to this. Teams is for teamwork. It's when we have a start and an end, and we have a specific work task ahead of us, whether that's a customer project or whether that's an internal project or whether that's the finance department, right? Communities should be department agnostic and they should be job agnostic. In some cases, they are not, they align with the job because it's people who are working in the same type of research and development or design department or something. But the intent of communities is that they should live over time. If you would manage this in teams, and some of you who have tried, you also know that you tend to have a lot of activity in a team initially, and then it tends to drop off because it's not accessible the same way as a community is. But predominantly, I would say there has been changes made now that, addresses this, because first of all, Engage no longer requires a Viva license. From June this year, Microsoft started deploying Engage natively in Teams, I want to add, as part of all M365 licenses. So your executives no longer need to make the decision if they're going to pay for it or not. They already have it in Teams, right? I had the question from a CTO the other day, well, if it's already in Teams, then why should we use Engage and not just use Teams? Well, it's a valid point, but again, it comes back to the fact that Engage was designed for communities and as a community platform. So you have a lot of ability to moderate the conversation, to have events, etc., that you don't really get in Teams. So I would really urge you to take another look at it. And we've been able to access Engage through Teams for a while. But what is different now is the licensing part, for one, but also the fact that it's natively integrated. So in your left-hand navigation bar in Teams, where you can have a mixed channel and chat experience, and you can add to your favorites channels as well as individual chats or group chats. You can also add communities to that favorites list. So it's integrated. It's not like one of the extra apps that you add and pin in Teams. And when you click on it, you're actually thrown over to a different application. It's now seamlessly integrated.
Thank you.
And analytics is really important because it comes with a dashboard that can show you how many questions have been posted, how many questions have been answered, how many answers did you get for every question that was posted, and what was the response time. And those are super valuable metrics, especially if you feel that you need to motivate to management why you need communities and how they benefit the organization, because there are hard metrics in there that you can use to build that business case.
Rebecca, can I ask another question? Less technical. My name is Gülsüm. I'm working for an bigger organization which is working in international development cooperation, and we have we have many projects working on different topics. And in our organization, we have more formalized communities on certain topics with budgets and also a certain structure of having conferences internally, worldwide, however. And then we have communities like the less formal ones, the ones you described, communities of practice, which are really based more on on your own interest to participate and share. And there is sometimes a bit of a tension or that and the formalized communities or the ones who are assigned to manage it, because they are, let's say there is a climate community, that they don't understand why there should be a less formalized community of practice which also works or deals with the same topics. I mean, I don't need convincing. I know why it makes sense, but are there certain do's and don'ts from your experience, or where you would say, okay, this is something that the formalized one rightly should rather deal with, and the non-formal communities of practice should just do other things, or what? Are there any experiences that you can share on that?
Well, there's no right or wrong answer to that, right? Because it depends on your organization, but predominantly it depends on the culture in your organization. So there's no cookie cutter approach. What I can share, though, is my own experience, right? First of all, if by formalized you mean that they're associated with a specific, like sustainability or HR or IT support, right? These definitely work, and there are plenty of examples, and some of those are actually hero communities or hero scenarios for the Engage team as well, right? They tend to highlight some of those. They are slightly different, right? Because if you have an HR community, then you might want to use that more for communications purposes to share changes, or here's the public holidays for the upcoming fiscal year, the days off, etc. Or here we have a new policy, a new travel policy, things like that. So they become more informative. But blending in and driving engagement in terms of encouraging people to ask questions that way can be very beneficial, right? The informal ones, as I alluded to earlier, could become a potential distraction and a time thief. So it is important to make the distinction that just because they're informal, they shouldn't be pointless. There should still be a little bit of governance around them. There still should be some kind of objective why you are supporting this community. You're always going to have the informal ones anyway. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the last thing I want to emphasize again is that, when management gets this idea that, oh, we need to create a community and we should add all of the people based on those criteria and tell them that they need to go be active, it doesn't work. Because we don't like, as humans, to be boxed in and told what to do generally. We tend to follow the people we choose to follow, not the people we're mandated to follow.
That was already a helpful answer. Thanks.
Good, thank you. I have one question here that from the chat that I want to take from Florian. Thank you. Florian's asking, with the tool Engage, you mean Viva Engage, formerly Yammer, right? Well, yes and no. First of all, and this is a personal pet peeve of mine, and don't take offense, Florian, but to compare Yammer and Engage that we have today is a little bit like comparing apple and pears. We went through this with our communities when I was still in Microsoft, because Microsoft acquired Yammer, and we tried to deploy it, and we tried to get our communities to move off what was then distribution lists in Outlook, in Exchange, hard-coded, right? And we couldn't. We tried 2 or 3 times and we couldn't. It had a similar purpose and intent, but the design of Engage compared to Yammer is completely different. It's rewritten from the core, and it has that integration that we could never get a seamless integration between Yammer and the rest of Office. The reason I'm not calling it Viva Engage anymore is because it's now only Engage. It's not a big announcement that Microsoft's been making, but it is related to the fact that you do not need to buy the Viva suite to have access to Engage. It's included in all the M365 licenses from business standard through premium to F3, E3, E5. So from the very basic business license up to the biggest enterprise license, anyone with an M365 license of any sort gets access to Engage. So it's more of an M365 app rather than a Viva app.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for jumping in here.
No worries.
Good. Fantastic. I think I need to cut you off, even though I don't like to do that. But
no, that's fine.
I think there's a huge queue outside of the door already for the next session. We need our second superwoman Emily on board, right?
Yes.
From San Francisco. But let's just take a quick break. Thanks so much for your time and insights. I think, yeah.
Thank you all. And I'll share the slides with you, Lucas. And I wasn't going to present the tips and tricks, but I've included them as a reading resource that goes a little bit more into the detail of what we were talking about around governance and so forth. Very nice to meet you all.
Thanks for having, thanks for being there. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, bye.